I wanted to do a fun, lighthearted, easy video today. So I figured what would be better than making some cookies and talking about controversial book opinion. I'm going to be trying a recipe out for some anise seed cookies. I have no idea if I like anise, but my partner is a fan of black licorice, so we're mostly making these cookies for him. Hopefully they turn out okay. We are starting off strong with the movie can be better than the book, which I honestly don't think is terribly controversial anymore. It just depends on the book and it depends on the movie. And it depends on whether the movie was meant to be representative of the book or if it was just based off the book. Because to me, those are different things. Is whether or not you're trying to retell the same story of the book or if it is just simply the book is an inspiration for your film. This one might actually be controversial, but I was a fan, am a fan. It's just been a while since I've seen them. But I liked the Hobbit movies. I really enjoyed the Hobbit itself. I did not like the Lord of the Rings as much. It was very long and very slow in parts. I read it all. I like the movies better than the book in that situation. But The Hobbit, I like both. I've read the book multiple times. I watched the movies probably only once because they're all super long. But I really enjoy the stories of each, and I think it's a good representation of the difference between the Lord of the Rings movies being ones that were trying to retell the story of the book and do a very good job of staying true to that original narrative that Tolkien writes out, versus the Hobbit movies being a situation that I would consider of taking inspiration from the book and then taking creative liberties on top of it. And I know some people didn't like the creative liberties. I thought they were interesting, and it was also nice to see some more female representation in the movies than you do get in the books. I agree with the movie can be better than the book in a lot of situations. Unpopular opinion number 2 is about the Da Vinci Code. I know nothing about this book, so I'm going to skip this. I can't get this brown sugar out. This is utterly ridiculous. Okay. There we go. Opinion number 3 is that men should read more romance novels. I could care less about this opinion. I don't really think anybody needs to be reading a certain genre or not. I think what's more important is reading diversely to find what suits your literary taste. And so for myself, one of the things that I try to do is whenever I have an opportunity to go to the library or go to a bookstore, whether or not I'm there to purchase anything, I like to just wander along the shelves and look for interesting titles or interesting book covers. I like to wander into genres that I don't read predominantly, just to see what's there and to pull books off the shelf and read the summaries, maybe read the first couple chapters of the book as a way to challenge myself to get out of the very confined genres that I read. Not that those are bad, and it's good to have go-to genres and go-to books even. Things that if you are in a reading slump, it will kick you out of it, right? And that are just comfortable for you. I also think it is important to challenge ourselves, whether that be with ideas in books or also the writing style of the book and the genre of the book. I spent most of last year reading a lot of fantasy and got to a place where every book started feeling the same. And so this year I'm really challenging myself to read all the other genres that I have on my shelf. I have a little bit of science fiction, I have a little bit of horror and mystery, I have a little bit of historical novels, I have a lot of nonfiction. I will slowly get to those, but I am definitely more of a fiction reader than a nonfiction reader, so I just I always try to have a fiction and nonfiction going at the same time. It just probably takes me longer to get through the nonfiction book. Long story short, I don't really care what genre you want to read. I don't think that one is better than another. I would just say pick them all up, find what you like, rotate occasionally. You know, variety is the spice of life, if you will. Okay, we have our sugars in the bowl, and those have to be creamed with the butter, except that it's supposed to be softened, and these are not soft yet. So I'm just gonna set that aside for a second and work on our dry ingredients. Opinion number 4 is that physical books aren't superior to reading digitally. This one, when I was younger, I definitely fell into the camp of thinking that physical books were better, and I liked the snobbish and self-righteous feeling that it gave me. The older I get, the more I could go either way. I find for certain situations, reading digitally is better because it actually helps me stay motivated to finish the reading. And so I like to read my textbooks for school digitally. So I'm not just sitting there with a massive tome that I feel visually I have to slog through. It's much easier to get through that type of reading and enjoy it more when I'm reading it digitally. And yes, of course you can see the page count, but it's hard to translate page count to the size of book. So it kind of tricks your brain into thinking that it's a more manageable chunk to get through. I also like the ability to read digitally for traveling. It just makes things easier. There's also the added benefit of sometimes it's just easier to get books electronically than it is to get physical copies. And so you can keep expanding your library and your literary taste electronically if you are confined by your budget for physical books or your space for physical books. I still do love physical books. Obviously, I have quite a few. I have 3 full to the brim bookshelves, so I can't say I'm not a fan of physical books. I do like the feel of them. I like the smell of them. I like the experience of reading a physical book, but I'm definitely at a point where I think I'll always have both. We are at 1.5 cups of flour. Our opinion number 5 is that an adaptation of a book doesn't have to be exactly the same. They're completely different mediums, and sometimes the way an author writes something doesn't work as well in live action, which is kind of similar to our opinion 1 about movies and books. It's all about the framing, and so if your framing is that you are retelling the story of the book, then of course you're going to have harsher critiques when you do take creative liberties in your interpretation, because someone else is going to come along with their own interpretation of the book and try to say that that's the right way and yours was not. If you're framing it in such a way that you are just inspired by the book, then potentially there's less concern that readers will get mad at you for changing something and adapting something. I know it's also hard because a lot of people, and myself included, I know that there's books that if someone adapted it, I would be upset if they didn't include a scene or a character or a dialogue that I loved in the novel. I'm always torn when I find a book that I love that hasn't been adapted into some form of media, and then I fall in love with it and I'm like, oh, I wish I could see these characters interact in real life. And then I always question that because I know that I might not like someone else's adaptation of it, and I feel more loyal to the book because it's what I read first and fell in love with first. So it's just hard. Like, I don't disagree with the opinion about adaptations having to be exactly the same as the book. Like, I don't think that's the case, right? Adaptations are adaptations. I just don't think the opinion reflects on whether or not, the opinion is not going to change whether or not people will like an adaptation. We're always going to deal with that and have feelings about whether or not an adaptation was better than the book, depending on which one we first came to and which one we feel represents the themes and the characters and the world and so on and so forth better than the other, if that makes sense. Number 6 is about Harry Potter. It doesn't need more stories or spin-offs. I could care less about this opinion. I came to Harry Potter very late. I was a child who was a victim to Harry Potter is witchcraft, and so you can't read it. So I didn't watch the movies. I read the books first on audiobook when I got a job and I had a very long commute. And I don't remember being impressed by the books. I think they were fine, but I definitely would not consider myself a Harry Potter fan. If I'm honest, I know the books, I know the storyline and the characters better from the movie because my partner really likes the movies, and so we watched all of them recently. And I think they're good. Like, it's a good world, it's a good story. It's hard because J.K. Rowling isn't exactly the best person, so I don't want to, be someone who continues to give her more money and more clout at all. I also have no hard feelings against Harry Potter fans. I just didn't grow up with it, and so I can't appreciate as deeply the fandom around it. Opinion 7 is about books about the real world. They're saying they don't like references to specific pop culture moments or historical events, especially situations that are present day. Sometimes I think it's fun to read books that do have references that I'm not familiar with, because then it is like a scavenger hunt of Googling and trying to figure out what someone is talking about. I sometimes like books as well that reference things that are kind of that inside joke feeling. It's fun to see those and like find the Easter eggs and be in the know. I also understand and have experienced the opposite, which is references to things that you are completely unaware of, and then you are on the outside of the inside joke, and that's not a fun place to be. I'm trying to remember an instance where I've read a book with references that interrupt the reading process. And I actually only have an example of something I loved, which is a book called Word by Word, I think. Let me go grab it from my shelf. This is the only book that I can think of that has real world references that I appreciated very deeply. This is by far one of my favorite nonfiction books I've ever read. It's called Word by Word, The Secret Life of Dictionaries by Corey Stamper. This book took me a very long time to read because every single sentence was like eating the most decadent chocolate cake. I just wanted to sit there and savor every single flavor and be in the moment with every single sentence that she writes. You can just tell that words are her life. Like, she is just steeped in the English language. So it's almost 10 years old, and honestly, even for 2017, it felt a little bit older than that, and a lot of her references were a little bit older than that. So it was sometimes hard for me to pick up on all of those references, but it was one where I definitely had to experience more of it being a scavenger hunt, and it was never a reference that felt like it was intended to go over my head or to laugh at me or to make fun of my lack of knowledge. It was very much here's little nuggets and encouraging you to want more and to do your own research and to look into things and surprise yourself, kind of. So I recommend this highly. And those are our dry ingredients that we are supposed to whisk together. My mixing bowl is probably a little too small, so I'm also probably whisking this wrong, but I feel like I'm gonna make a mess. Don't judge me. I'm not a baker by trade. I'm just trying to be a nice girlfriend. Okay, get all the clumps out, mostly. That's what this is for, so I think that's okay. Got it fairly well incorporated and managed to get only a small bit of flour everywhere. How's our butter doing? Still hard. How soft is softened butter supposed to be? We'll just go ahead and put in the sugar. Unpopular opinion 8. Books based on TV shows are completely worth relaxing with and are the best kind of vacation, airplane, beach, and poolside reads. I don't know if I care whether or not something is based on a book or not. I think sometimes what I feel more so is the stereotype of characters. Sherlock Holmes and Watson, right, being a very, very common trope in a lot of different TV shows and movies. And it's not always well done, and sometimes you sit there and think, man, the original Sherlock Holmes isn't even that great. It's just now so common that you can't get away from it. To me, that's more of what I experience with shows, and what can cause my dislike of TV shows is not the literary content that they are based off of, the specific literary content they're based off of, but more of whether or not they fall into certain tropes and stereotypes. With the caveat that tropes and stereotypes can be used well and can be interesting, it just takes special care and attention to do that versus relying on those tropes and stereotypes in lieu of character development and world building. Okay, I will talk about opinion 9, and then I'm going to go cream this butter and sugar. 9 is about The Catcher in the Rye. It opened up something inside me as a teenager that I've been unable or unwilling to articulate about how terribly lonely and empty I felt all the time, and how I felt as I couldn't understand other people and they couldn't understand me. I have read The Catcher in the Rye once. I have it on my shelf, and so I will probably read it again. I vaguely recall being pretty moved by this book when I read it as a teenager. I think it is one of those books that does encapsulate the angst of adolescence. So when you read it at that age, you are inclined to resonate with the main character. I remember being fascinated by him just making a decision to do something and doing it. At that point in time in my life, I felt very restricted and controlled by certain individuals and afraid of ever trying to break out of that environment. I didn't think it was possible. And so I had built up inner worlds and secret worlds in my head for myself, and was able to escape through books to that place of freedom in seeing myself in other characters or living vicariously through other characters. And I recall when I read The Catcher in the Rye that was something that particularly spoke to me, was a young person just living life and being unafraid to choose to live life and to live life on their terms. It's not a book I remember very well, so I can't say it changed my life or that I reread it all the time and I find a ton of meaning in it. But again, I think books speak differently to everyone, and that's good. That's why we have so many books, and why I just encourage people to pick a lot of them up and read them and read more and find what calls to you and what will surprise you and what will shape you in ways that you didn't expect to be touched and shaped. Okay, I'm gonna go cream this. So while I have the sugar and butter creaming, which I know is going on in the background, and so you can probably hear it a little bit, it's gonna take a few minutes to do. So I want to talk about opinion number 10, otherwise we'll be here for 5 hours. I hate it when the book cover is changed to match the film or show based on it. I like imagining the characters, not having the actor you choose invade my idea of the book. I do agree with this opinion. It goes back to something I said earlier of if you read the book first and then a movie comes out, it can destroy your own vision of the world and of the characters that you had in your head, and that can be very disorienting and very frustrating. It bothers me less if it's something where it is my first time approaching that work of literature and maybe the movie is all that I know, or I haven't watched the movie but it's since come out and now all the artwork and character design matches the movie instead. I still don't love it even then, because I do think that you should allow readers to have that space to imagine and to follow the direction of the author, or the openness of the author for readers to envision these characters and envision the worlds in their minds. I also find it very difficult when you have characters who no longer represent the descriptions in the book. That one I take particular issue with, of things like I have not watched it and I've been avoiding it, but I do know one controversy around the new Wuthering Heights movie is the fact that Heathcliff is not black, and he is supposed to be black in the book. And I think those kind of situations in which characters are whitewashed, something about them that's fundamental to them is changed from the book to the movie or TV show adaptation. I don't like that, and I don't like that when the book design and the character design is then made to reflect the movie versus the original, versus the author's descriptions of the character. Okay, sugar and butter are creamed. I added the egg and the anise seed and mixed that in as well. Now we just gotta scrape this all off and then combine our wet and dry ingredients. Oh, I also have to add this recipe calls for cream of tartar, which I don't have because I don't make snickerdoodles all the time. And I didn't want to buy it just for this recipe. So I am going to try to use white vinegar instead, because Google said that was an acceptable substitute. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, so 1 teaspoon liquid for ½ teaspoon cream of tartar. And it is a ½ teaspoon, so I need a teaspoon of vinegar. Gotta go get the teaspoon. I'm a very organized baker, can't you tell? Just a very organized person in general. Next opinion, trying to read as many books as possible in a month, year, etc., purely to hit a number entirely misses the point of reading. I do resonate with this opinion the older I get and the more that I don't have a ton of time on my hands. I used to read over 100 books a year and quickly realized when you have a job and a life that being able to read that much in a year just tends to not be humanly possible anymore. I was also able to read that much for many years because I had a commute to work, and I had for a long time a 90-minute commute one way. I would listen to audiobooks, and sometimes with audiobooks you can listen to them on 1.5 or 2 times speed. And so I just got through a massive amount of books. And then COVID happened, and I have worked remotely since. And so it takes a lot more dedication for me to sit down and to read. I have to be a lot more intentional with that time. I still love reading, don't get me wrong. It's easy to do. it's just one of those things when you have so many other distractions going on in your life that it's easy to forget to read and to always tell yourself, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later. So it has to become a habit. Again, just like listening to audiobooks on a commute had become a habit. I had to establish new ones, and the new ones don't always allow me to read as much as I did. I don't find that my life is any worse, regardless of how many books I read a year or not. I think reading challenges can be fun in the sense that they can be a motivation for you to read if you're not someone who reads consistently. But I don't think the challenge has to be even, I want to read 100 books in a year, 50 books in a year. I think it can be things like, I want to read 5 books by this author, or I want to read a specific series, or I want to read a book in X different genres. My personal goal this year is to just get through as many books on my shelves that I own that I haven't read. So my to be read list, right? And I'm not setting a specific number for myself. I think I have one on Goodreads. I don't really pay attention to it, and I will definitely change it if I either don't meet it or if I exceed it. I'll just change it to whatever number is close to what I did read, which is kind of cheating. I don't know why I use it. It's just there and it's Goodreads, and it kind of tempts you to put a number in, so I do. But I don't really think it's reflective of the quality of my reading life. I agree with the opinion that the number of books you read is not important. What is important is that your reading goals reflect the type of reader and literary life you want to have. 12 is about another book that I've never read, so I'm going to skip it. 13, sometimes the books aren't good, but the characters and concepts are. That's my unpopular opinion. This opinion, I actually had a video come out recently about it where I was talking about rereading a series and really finding that I didn't like certain aspects of the book, but I was in it because I thought the characters were interesting and I liked the plot. So this opinion, 100%, I have nothing more to say. Sometimes the book is not great and you just read it for the characters and the concepts because those are still important and interesting. Number 14, The Hobbit is a better book than any of the trilogy. Also an opinion that I do heavily agree with. I don't know if it's because The Hobbit was technically a children's book. I think we would consider it more young adult now. And so I liked it better because it was shorter, it was more digestible. The trilogy was a saga and a slog. I haven't read the books in a while. I read them when I was in high school, which is quite a number of years since then. I remember very distinctly getting to a point in book 2, about the halfway point, where I sat there on my bed and I said out loud to myself, are they ever going to be done walking? Like, if I have to read one more chapter of them walking, I think I might throw this book across the room. There is a fine line between showing a journey and the hardships of a journey in a book that makes the reader appreciate the hardships of that, while also not making the reader feel like they are literally there and that we are literally going through it real time. More often than not, to me, it felt like I was experiencing this journey real time, and it was going to take me 6.5 months to finish these books, just like it would take them 6.5 months to accomplish their trip to Mordor. That was very frustrating as a reader. Not that I craved more action, and the character development was good. It was just, I think the pacing probably is the best way to say it. The pacing was just off. I had struggles with the pacing. So I agree with the opinion that The Hobbit is a better book. I need to now go put this back on the mixer and add in my dry ingredients, which means I'm probably going to pause here, finish mixing these, chuck it in the fridge for 2 hours, and then come back and film the rest of these opinions while I roll the dough into cookies. So I will see you at that later point in the day. Alrighty, we are back. We have our chilled cookie dough that I'm going to start shaping into individual servings as I finish up our last 5 controversial book opinions. I'm sorry, I think I spit. Number 15 is also specific to a book. It's about The Fault in Our Stars and liking The Fault in Our Stars. I read this book again after the height of its popularity. I think the movie had already been made by the time that I saw it, so I don't have any strong feelings. I have read a lot of John Green's books, and I will say this is probably my least favorite of his. I liked Paper Towns a little bit more. I liked An Abundance of Catherines more than that. Honestly, I'm not a huge John Green fan. I don't mind his writing, but I think there are better young adult writers out there. If you watch my top 5 books of 2025, Maggie Stiefvater, I don't know exactly how to say her name, but she wrote a series that I recommend in that video, which kind of has the feel of some of John Green's characterizations. I liked her young adult writing a lot better. I thought her characters were a lot more interesting. I thought she dealt with themes in a more interesting way, and also it's magical realism, so it was, I don't know, it was interesting. Opinion 16 is about offering incentives to get kids to read, which I agree with, actually, in part. I have fond memories of when I grew up, our library did summer reading plans. I was young enough as well, I'm old enough, maybe is actually how to phrase it, that you would get the free pizzas, the personal pizzas at Pizza Hut if you read and met your goal. And I loved it as a child because it was fun to have a challenge. Not that I wouldn't have read without it, but it was fun to have kind of that camaraderie around a reading challenge and have a goal to work towards over the summer, and it was an enjoyable activity for me. I think it can be difficult when you're talking about kids of not making reading feel like a chore. I think you have to be careful with the incentives that you would do to try to ensure that reading is an activity that they come to learn to love for itself, and not just because it gets them, it's a means to an end. But I also understand it from a perspective of a lot of people have the experience of they read only in the context of school. And so they may need some external stimulation in order to find pleasure in reading outside of a syllabus, if you will. I mostly agree with the opinion. I think you have to be careful with it, but that applies to a lot of things in life. Opinion number 7 is that utopian fiction is more interesting than dystopian fiction. I don't know if I've actually ever read utopian fiction. Like, leave in the comments below, what would that even be? I've never heard that description or that genre of fiction before. I'm very curious to hear if you all have read a utopian fiction, and if you have any that you would recommend, or authors that you would recommend in that genre, because I'm very intrigued by it. 18. I've seen a lot of people say they only read books once, and in their words, why would they reread a book when they could read a new one? I think rereading books is crucial to a deep understanding of the work. Read the book once for the plot, read again for the theme, read a third time for patterns and details you didn't catch before. Definitely think rereading is worthwhile. I don't think it's an absolute must, but I definitely have books that I reread. There's a lot of times where I reread because I'm familiar with the book. I know how long it's going to take me. I know what to expect. And I just need something that's comfortable and familiar. And so that's especially when I pick up my young adult fiction novels, because they're just easy to read. They're easy to get through. And that's what I need at that time. I also reread a fantasy series recently because the latest book came out, and it had been probably over a year since I had first read them, and so I just made the commitment to reread all of them again when the new book came out. I did learn a lot of new things, noticed a lot of different things on the reread, so I definitely understand rereading as a way to learn more than just the plot, because definitely the first time you're reading a book, you everything is new, and so there's a lot of things that you miss. And so there is beauty in rereading, and sometimes there's frustration in rereading, in that you find that a book that you enjoyed the first time, on the second read, it's not exactly as good as you had found it, and some of that's just because of the different stage in life. I will save that topic because I've already done a video on it, and I will move on to opinion number 19. Again, another opinion I know nothing about because I've never read Calvin and Hobbes. I guess I'll say this as Calvin and Hobbes being just like a comic strip is better written than 90% of the books I've read. I can't speak to Calvin and Hobbes directly, but there are a lot of bad books out there. There's a lot of very poorly written books that somehow managed to get published, so I'm not going to disagree with this person just because it's a comic strip. I think that comics are a form of popular media, and in order to be published there, same as with books, you do have to have a level of skill as a writer, and possibly more because of the constraints of the medium. I think it's just another way of being able to reach people and connect with people, like you find with books. Everybody has their own cup of tea. And that's about all I have to say on this one. Opinion 20, the world of I'm a book reading person who reads books merchandise is cringe. I kind of want to agree with this, and at the same time, I would feel like I would be a bit hypocritical if I did, because I do have a hoodie that says, what does it say? A bibliophilia, the fear of running out of books, and I have a matching mug. Granted, I did not buy these for myself. They are a gift from a previous coworker of mine. But I do love them. I think they're kind of cute in a cringe way, and I wear them very proudly. I wear the hoodie very proudly and drink out of the mug all the time. Again, I have nothing against people who wear that kind of stuff. I don't mind the merchandise so much as I just mind the stereotype of being a reader. That's the one that gets me more. This is going to get me probably a lot of hate, but I dislike Rory Gilmore in the Gilmore Girls. I'm not a huge fan of the show, but the stereotype of Rory being a reader is also one of the things that made me not fall in love with the show and not continue watching the show. It was her whole personality, right? She was the smart girl, she was the reader, and I just didn't like it. I say that also being like, that was me growing up, and maybe that's why I find it super cringe sometimes. My mother pushed that on my sisters and I, that we needed to be smart people, and smart people meant being book people, and so you always had to be reading something and talking about books and being smart. So I get it. I get why it comes off as cringe and unrelatable and even snobbish. At the same time, you do you. Just, if you want all the cute things and you like buying the merchandise, I can see it as someone who does that would look at me and be like, well, you buy books. You never stop buying books. Why do I have to stop buying the mugs and the shirts with all the quotes on them and the book puns and the jokes and so on and so forth. So it is what it is. 21. Overall, Agatha Christie is a better author than Arthur Conan Doyle, but Sherlock Holmes is a better character than Poirot. I think I might agree with this opinion. I read all of the Hercule Poirot. I don't know if that's how you say the name of that character, but I read all of those books. They definitely got boring at a certain point in time because there's like, I don't know, over 20 of them. There's an insane amount. That was not even the only mystery series that Agatha Christie wrote. I remember them being well written. I remember that there were some pretty memorable characters and moments from the book. They were enjoyable, and honestly, for mystery books, like lighthearted mystery books, that's kind of all you can ask for. I do think Sherlock Holmes being a better character, I don't know if I would say better character, but obviously given the amount of Sherlock Holmes spin-offs that have happened over the past century, he's obviously a memorable character. If you want to say that makes him a better character, sure, go for it. I think it's a fair statement. Opinion 22, just because you have criticisms about the book, it doesn't mean you don't like it or think the whole thing is bad. Just because I found a plot hole in a book and pointed out doesn't mean I'm hating on the book. It just means I found a plot hole. I agree with this one. While I was waiting for the dough to chill, I was listening to a book review on YouTube, and it was funny because the booktuber pointed out a couple of the inconsistencies in the book. There's like a scene near the beginning where the main character pulls out earbuds or earplugs from her pocket, and then a couple sentences later talks about wishing that she had pockets. And so it was just funny to read this opinion right after I had watched that, where someone was like, yeah, I ended up liking the book, but there were these weird inconsistencies in the novel that are just kind of funny to spot as a reader. It always reminds me of those moments at which when you find typos in books, or you'll yourself be writing an email and you read it over and over and over again, and maybe you have someone else read it, and then you send it, and that's when you notice that there's still typos in it, and you kind of just facepalm yourself. I'm always curious when I find typos in books. You know that they've gone through multiple rounds of edits, and they've had so many eyes on them, and yet they still make it to publication with issues. And I think it's just part of being human, right? That sometimes works of art are good and still not perfect, and that is okay. And we all have to learn that lesson at some point in life. Opinion number 23, hardcover books are just not as good as paperback. I don't really have a preference between paperback or hardback. I know a lot of people get frustrated with like the binding issues of paperback books, and then people have issue with the fact that hardback is more expensive, but it's also looks nicer. And the older I get, the more that honestly I kind of like well-worn books. I shop mostly secondhand, like half-price books and Goodwill for books, because I just like the idea of rehoming books, and I like when I stumble across books where someone else has left their thoughts and the highlights and notes, so I can kind of, get a peek into somebody else's brain. I like books having that gently used air about them. It's like living in a cozy house. You know someone lives there. You can see that it's taken care of and it's clean, but it's not perfect. And I think the benefit of paperbacks is that they also can be like that. And it's okay if you spill coffee on a book, or you dog-ear the pages, or you crease the binding. That is my last cookie, and we are down to the last two opinions, so I will try to go through these quickly. 24, Reading while walking is one of the great pleasures in life and is the superior way to read. Find a nice flat park with wide lanes and no open manholes. I admire people who can read books and walk at the same time, or read books and do any other task at the same time. I try to do that occasionally, and I just cannot walk a straight line, and I end up walking super slowly as well. So I can't do it. It's very hard for me. The most I can do is an audiobook and walk. So more power to you if you're someone who is able to have a physical book and do another activity while you're reading. Last but not least, opinion 25. I like all the whaling details in Moby Dick. I think this one is just thrown in there for rage bait or just to have a laugh. I'm sure this is a genuine comment. I have nothing against Moby Dick. I just think it's a commitment, and you have to know that going in. I either listened to it or had it read to me once as a child, and every time I tried to pick it up on my own, I don't think I ever got past the first 50 pages. And that's about all I have to say. I remember it being a really interesting book. I know it's a classic. I'm not going to push anyone to ever read it. And I'm also not going to say that you're wrong if you decide to read it and skip a few things. Maybe whaling details are not interesting to you or necessary. So go right ahead and skim those chapters and get to the exciting stuff. And with that, my friends, we are done with the controversial book opinions. I am done with my anise seed cookies. These are now going to go in the freezer to bake on another day. Let me know in the comments some of your controversial book opinions. Let me know about that opinion on utopian fiction, if you have read any of those books and have authors or titles that you would like to recommend. And I will see you in the next one.